Access granted. 70年，他把中华人民奴役，还让这片土地变得满目疮痍。全世界投毒制造各种生化武器，我去，他答应了人类命运共同体。三代爆料，携手再有新天道，振兴我中华同胞，兴起了灭共浪潮。壮志冲云霄，看那国旗飘飘，烈鸟铁岭河南，神州阳光普照。江山小，血雨遥，谁负谁生出一份孝。风萧萧，人小险如潮，太不堪。 水每天都有一点也不嫌多。以美灭共，以共灭共，还得靠我们战友们行动。天佑我中华儿女，共建联邦新中国。黑夜显曙光，照亮东方的天。戳破公会的谎言，我准备了3世多年，越过了死亡幽谷，踏上了灭共之路。总有太多雄剑，我们出发驰骋虚度。听梦想，收归正道，一周踏浪自逍遥。苍生笑。热血万丈高，仰天长啸志英豪。战友们豪气穿云霄，寒武相聚在今朝。我顶峰 The voice to save the world, sitting behind the people's side. We are running out of time. Take down action. Take down the system. Take down action. Take down the system. La 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 堂，为母亲眼中的期望。兄弟们站起来反抗，英雄故事必被后代传唱。我们是勇士的民族，过去的血在身上流淌，神圣的母语放声高喊，我还们能比猴子大呀！哦嘿呦，哦嘿呦，哦嘿呦，哦嘿呦，哦嘿呦，哦嘿呦，哦嘿呦，哦嘿呦，哦嘿呦，哦嘿呦。旗帜在马背上，雄鹰矗立在我肩膀，一生在战场，是我的荣耀。嘿呦，嘿呦，嘿呦，伟大的长生殿，我的魂与你同在，我们是的草原真正的主人。嘿呦，嘿呦，嘿呦，我们是的草原真正的主人。嘿呦，嘿呦，嘿呦，我还不能比猴子大呀！
Good evening, Fringers. Welcome to episode 45 of The Fringe. It is Friday, June 18th, 2021. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, David Vincent Bob. The Fringe is simultaneously broadcast every Tuesday and Friday night from 7 to 8 p.m. on gtv.org at MOS Talk. Please share this information with all your family and friends and let them know that they can come here if they want to hear the real truth about what's going on in the news. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a very, very exciting announcement to make. We have a brand new co-host with us tonight. Our dearly beloved Ada has graduated from college and has moved on to the real world. So we want to first of all send out a huge shout out to Ada and a congratulations, and we wish her the very best in all of her future endeavors. And Ada does know that the doors are always open for her here at the Fringe. But for now, we have a brand new co-host with us tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to our good friend and fellow whistleblower for the new federal state of China, Daniel. Daniel, welcome to the show, my friend. Thank you so much for filling in for Ada and joining us tonight on The Fringe.
Thank you so much for having me on, David.
So Daniel, why don't you tell us a little bit about, before we get started here, just give a little bit about your background, how you got involved with the whistleblower movement in the new federal state of China, and then how you ended up here tonight on the show.
Well, yes, David. So I have seen a couple of videos on YouTube of Mr. Guo's interview, and it certainly captivated me because my family has has gone through similar experiences, and we know exactly what he's talking about when he talks about the corruption of the Chinese Communist Party. And then my parents first started listening to Mr. Guo, and they would play his live streams when I'm around in the house, and I would just listen to him. And I decided to join the movement because I think that I could do a lot of good here, and I could help take down the CCP.
Well, thank you very much. It's a great story, and that's usually how people get involved. Is they turned on the turned on the computer one day and heard about this guy talking, or heard about this Mr. Miles Guo, and my wife got me turned on to it rather quickly, and Prince and my good friend Phil, and I even saw you at the June 3rd anniversary celebration. So it's great to have you here with us tonight, and we're excited to get the show started with you here. So let's go on to our very first breaking news story this evening. Representative Dan Muser, he's a Republican from Pennsylvania, was recently on Fox Business with Maria Bartiromo talking about the G7 summit with Biden and Putin. And just so you know, Dan Muser is also on the Foreign Affairs Committee in the U.S. Congress. So let's roll that video now, please.
And President Putin having their face-to-face meeting yesterday in Geneva. The two leaders touched on a range of topics, including national security, human rights, and cybersecurity, both highlighting the cybersecurity issues in their separate press conferences following the summit. Watch.
I talked about the proposition that certain critical infrastructure should be off limits to attack, period, by cyber or any other means. I gave them a list. If I'm not mistaken, I don't have it in front of me, 16 specific entities, 16 defined as critical infrastructure under U.S. policy.
As for American sources, they've said that most of the cyber attacks in the world are carried out from the cyber realm of the United States. In second place is Canada.
Joining me right now is Pennsylvania Congressman, Foreign Affairs Committee member, and Small Business Committee member Dan Muser. Congressman, it's great to see you this morning. Thanks very much for being here. Your reaction to that summit?
Well, we do know that he informed CNN that what the hell, he's not confident in anything. No, hey, let's remove some politics from this, and let's take the politics out and look at who got what, right? In the end, Putin got a 5-year extension on START with receiving nothing in return, no retribution whatsoever on cyber attacks. In fact, he said he knew nothing about them, no real big ask there or commitment. He actually did receive from President Biden a list of 16 of our most critical assets. So meanwhile, Vladimir Putin knows nothing about the cyber attacks or where they came from, but hey, I'll take that list of 16 of your most critical assets and see what I can do. I mean, you almost can't make this up. We received no retribution whatsoever for the, again, the attack on Colonial. They got a Nord Stream pipeline, and Putin got the world stage to show off himself. Okay, in return, we received being told it's none of our business when it comes to the Ukraine, right? And an agreement to talk further down the line. So again, removing politics from this, I don't see many successes here, no matter how hard I try.
You know, I don't understand why Biden would list 16 critical areas that are not to be hacked, as if Putin is just going to follow Biden's rules. Oh, okay, I'll make sure those critical areas are not hacked. I mean, you just gave away the priorities and what's most important to America to an adversary.
It's unbelievable. Think of that in a military sense. I look at it in a business sense. If an opponent took one of your best people and then you gave him a list and said, okay, but if you take any of these 16, I'm going to be really mad. It's mind-boggling.
That's so naive.
So before we get into this, I have an announcement to make. I didn't want to reveal this to anybody, but it's not something that's definite. But we try to get some American guests and politicians, if we can, on this show. I do have a connection indirectly with Representative Muser. So if you're watching out there tonight, I did send him a clip of one of our past shows. He's on the Foreign Affairs Committee, so obviously he's well versed in what's going on in China and other countries all over the world in relation to what's happening in the U.S. So Representative Muser, if you're out there watching, we'd love to have you on the show. Please contact me. I'll send you my information, and let's try to get you on the show and talk about some really important things going on over in China with the CCP. What really stood out to me here, Daniel, with this article, with this video, is that Putin blamed the U.S. for most of the cyber attacks that occur all over the world. You know, Daniel, I was watching several different news sources. Even though I don't agree with pretty much 99.9% of what the MSM says, you still have to kind of listen to what they say. You know what they say, keep your friends close and your enemies even closer. But I always try to keep an eye out and listen. And it seemed like it was almost 50-50 on the line there with this. Cyber attacks do happen from this country. It's something we can't deny. So I'm not saying that Putin's right. Why would you believe a former KGB member who still thinks with the mind of the KGB, but that's what he was going with there. And it's kind of like how the CCP does things too. They redirect, you blame them for something and they point the finger back at you. And, you know, in general, Daniel, with these, with the G7 summit this year, one of the things that really was embarrassing for our president and for our nation in general was how he threw BLM back on us. I know it kind of goes off to the left of this topic a little bit, but for me, it kind of encapsulates what was really going on at this summit. And just trying to stand up with their chest out and saying, you got to fix this and don't do that. And Putin saying, yeah, but look at your country. Look what you're doing. And he had a right to do that. And unfortunately, Putin was right on that instance right there with BLM. This country burned to the ground pretty much during last summer. It was horrible. Everybody saw what happened, how everybody reacted to the death of George Floyd, how this scam Marxist organization stole millions and millions of dollars from people. And now they're living in the founders are now living in rich white neighborhoods. But I do digress. But the point is, if you're going to point the finger at somebody, make sure you know and you realize that there'll be other fingers pointing back at you. We are not a perfect nation, and I'm not defending what Putin said. But the point is that we did paint ourselves back in a corner with BLM, no doubt about it. He did also talk about, Muser did, about what Biden said about our 16 critical assets. And to me, Daniel, that's pretty much giving away the keys to the kingdom. I mean, another good analogy, if you give this is in reference to Hunter Biden. If you give some rocks to a crack addict, he's going to smoke it. So you think Putin's really going to, this is an open-ended question. Do you really think Putin's going to care? They're going to do what they do and what they've always done. This was all political grandstanding to me, Daniel. He told us to keep our mind, none of your business in relation to the Ukraine. But the good thing about the summit was, though, Daniel, is that they talked about all countries did talk about the atrocities going on in Xinjiang with the Uyghurs, and that's really close to my heart. If you've seen any of the past episodes, I'm sure you have. And basically, so I just kind of want to put it out there for you and just ask you, I'm sure you have some things you want to share about this topic, but basically, what do you think about our president's handling of the G7? Did he come across to you as weak or strong, or what's your opinion on that, Daniel?
Well, let me tell you, frankly, I don't think that Putin would care about anything Biden has to say.
Yeah.
And it is just very disappointing and simply stupid for Biden to hand a list of critical assets of the U.S. over to an adversary. Yeah. And that really shows his weakness to the entire world. And I think he's became a laughing stock, and well, he has been a laughing stock, but now he's really done it, and he's not capable of leading. And to the Xinjiang issue, I think that you've mentioned the Black Lives Matter movement, and I think that if Biden or the Democrats really care about human rights, they should look at what the Communist Party is doing in China. That's what's really, that's the main issue here. You see all those terrible atrocities that they commit to the people in the Xinjiang region, and they are just concerned about the domestic issue, and I don't think that's right.
Yeah, that's a great point, Daniel, and something, we've talked about this before on the Fringe, is that we do, we have our own problems we have to take care of in our own home, but you can't. One of the things the G7 does is they're democracies. They come together to discuss what's going on all over the world with other countries, and they kind of like lay down the law. It's supposed to be like kind of an iron fist. Hey, if you're doing this, you got to stop, But it almost comes across as like a narrative of just a repeating rhetoric that we hear over and over again. And it's unfortunate because the problem is we don't see any results coming out of any of this usually. Sometimes there are, again, it's just, puffing your chest out, political grandstanding stuff. And, as far as the Uyghurs go, you can lump that in the same category with COVID, which is what we're going to talk about next, the Delta variant of that, is that we have still not held anyone accountable for that. We know these atrocities are going on in Xinjiang, and we're not holding anyone, and the CCP is not being held accountable for that either. So you made some great points there, and it was great that we talked about the Uyghurs in Xinjiang and what's going on there, because we're going to go right into China now. And let's talk about that Delta variant threat.
David,
yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to add one last thing.
Oh, yeah.
For someone like Biden to give Putin a list of critical assets and tell Putin to not touch these things, what happens when Putin really attacks one of these critical assets? What is Biden going to do about it? Does anyone really believe that Biden is capable of doing anything to Putin if he does attack one of these critical assets? That's a question that we should keep in mind.
Yeah, and that's a great question. And according to, if you watch Biden, and something you also reiterated and alluded to, was the fact that he seems very weak in his stances toward, our own democracy, as well as toward our dealings with foreign affairs. Is that, to be honest with you, and I know that was an open-ended question, it's something we should definitely keep an eye on. But to be honest with you, I don't think he'd do anything about it. I really don't think they care, to be honest. When you look at the first 140 whatever days there's been right now, we have 86 days of the vice president who was put in charge of the southern border still not going there. We have the U.S. doing nothing still about the COVID situation. There's one thing after the other. He signed 13 executive orders overturning great policies that Trump put into place that are now completely gone. They don't care about what's going on in this country. And to answer that question, although I know it was open-ended, Daniel, is that I really think if we are attacked again, cyber-wise, they're not going to do anything about it, because Biden already Putin already put his foot down, and he's not scared of Joe Biden. He is not afraid of him. Biden has shown tremendous weakness. Putin's martial arts trained KGB guy. He is not afraid of Joe Biden, and he's going to continue to do whatever he wants. And my short answer is Biden's not going to do anything about it.
Absolutely.
So let's move on to that Delta variant threat now. We talked about this for, I think, 4 or 5 episodes in the past here on the Fringe, Daniel. And the Delta variant, as you probably know, is a coronavirus, a COVID-19 variant that struck the nation of India, and it was devastating. It was at an apocalyptic level. They broke world records for daily deaths and infections. And the scariest part is this thing is starting to make its way over to the U.S. But when you watch this video, people, I want you to see how political. I want you to keep this in mind. We did this on Tuesday with another video. I want you to keep in mind political propaganda. Let's roll that video now, please.
Back home in the U.S., 2 very different stories are emerging on the COVID pandemic. Restrictions have been lifted in all but a handful of states as cases continue their steep decline. But there's new reason tonight health officials are sounding the alarm for those who haven't been vaccinated. Here's CBS's Nikki Battiste.
Tonight, our summer of freedom may be in jeopardy as the Delta variant spreads across the U.S. Cases now nearly doubling every 2 weeks.
It tends to look like it might even be more serious in making people ill.
Delta, first found in India, is now responsible for almost 10% of new COVID cases here in the U.S.
Now we know that the Delta virus is actually anywhere from 50 to 60% more infectious than was the B117. So this is surely a grave concern.
Epidemiologist Michael Osterholm says those most at risk, anyone with only one dose or unvaccinated, like kids under 12 and regions where vaccination rates lag.
When you look at the South, where there is a lot of vaccine hesitancy, how concerned are you about the South?
I'm very concerned about the South. We have over 100 counties in this country right now that have less than 20% of the residents vaccinated. Those are time bombs waiting to happen. This virus will find you if you're not vaccinated.
As the Biden administration pushes to get 70% of Americans vaccinated with at least one dose by Independence Day, at least 20 states are now banning so-called vaccine passports, documents which could have encouraged people to get a shot. And tonight, 45 states and Washington, D.C. are now fully open, but not every American is ready to celebrate.
I'm still skeptical. But only because there's just too many people that are not vaccinated and we can get more variants.
Moderna says the Biden administration agreed to buy 200 million additional doses of its COVID vaccine today, and that the shots could be used as boosters or for children under 12 if the FDA gives emergency use authorization. Nora?
Nikki Batiste, thank you. Back home in the U.S.,
Daniel, have you ever seen a more absolutely front-forward propaganda about getting a COVID shot? I can't believe, when I saw this, first of all, let's break this down. There's so many layers to this and so much I want to discuss about this. We know that this deadly variant is out there. We know what it did to India. It's so concerning to me that this stuff all happens exactly when it should be happening. We had the Delta variant completely annihilate a quarter of India, just killing millions of people. And then all of a sudden, Joe Biden, Daniel, is not making his goal of how many shots he wanted to have in arms by July. And guess what? The Delta variant's here. So here's what's going to happen. It's 50 to 60% more infectious. And who's most at risk? This is the part that really got me, was when they said, Daniel, that basically they said this: if you don't get this shot, you will die. That's what that guy just said. He said, if you don't get this shot, it will kill you. He said that in so many words. He said it in a way that was politically correct, but that's what he said. Let me ask you a question. How can cases of COVID be on a significant decline, yet we have a variant that's doubling every 2 weeks? How did that happen all of a sudden? I don't know where all this is coming from. See, Daniel, this is why people don't want to get the shot in the first place. They never know what to believe. We are being forced by our government to put something in our body that is not 100% sure, that are not even sure can vaccinate you or keep you safe from the COVID. We know, and the reason we argue this on GTV is because we know that this was lab created. The MSM is starting to wake up to that fact, but you can't create a vaccine for something that was lab created. And it's scientifically proven that once the variants start, you are not going to be protected against the virus with your current vaccine. But this article, this one we just watched, said that you would be. I'm not buying it, Daniel. I'm not buying it at all. I'd like to get your thoughts on that. Do you think we should be getting vaccinated?
Well, David, I think it's nothing new that they're doing here. They're constantly fear-mongering, and they're telling you that you have to get this vaccine or else you'll basically die. That is the underlying message that they're sending us. Absolutely. And one thing that I want to mention is that they say that we are not going to have a summer of freedom because of this new variant, the Delta variant. And I think that the key takeaway is that the American people need to know that we will never have a summer of freedom, or any freedom for that matter, as long as the Chinese Communist Party continues to release these bioweapons.
Great point. Yes. Go ahead. Yeah.
The American people need to know this, because right now it's okay to be afraid. I mean, this Delta variant basically destroyed India, and you think that you trust if you trust the government, which I don't think you should, you get vaccinated, and then you're not actually protected against this new variant. We need the cure. And who has the cure? That's the Chinese Communist Party. They have the cure. We need to get it from them. That's how we stop this. Because if we don't do that, it's never going to stop.
Yeah, the problem is, though, Daniel, when we point the finger at the CCP, of course, they point the finger right back at us. And when we did this during the Trump administration, Trump first broke this news when Dr. Li Mingyang came over here. He believed her. He knew what was happening. She told the world, nobody listened. And if you listened, you were called a misogynist, a bigot, a xenophobe, whatever it was. And Trump told, he cut off travel from China, and a xenophobe for doing it. Nobody wanted to take advantage of the fact that they knew that this thing was coming from China. We should have at least went to Wuhan, Daniel, to investigate this. And I want to ask you, why didn't we? Why didn't we go to China to investigate this?
Well, I'll tell you why, David. It was because the World Health Organization was in the Communist Party's pocket. I mean, that's the simple truth. And one thing that I want to mention is how in the video that we just watched, they mentioned how some states are banning so-called vaccine passports. And they said that those passports could potentially encourage people to take the vaccine. See, that is an absolute lie. By encourage, they really mean force. They want you to be forced to take the vaccine. And if you don't have the vaccine passport, you're not going to be able to go out to grocery shop, to go to school, or do anything. And I am seeing the United States before my eyes leaning into a socialist country.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that more later on in this episode too. And yeah, that's a great point, Daniel. And one of the things I do, with me here on the Fringe, I also learn every week. I love having guests like you, hosts that come in and give me a fresh perspective and point of view. Ada and Isla did it every week, and you're doing it now. And that's the most important thing, is to see it from the eyes, especially of a person that lived. You did live in China, correct, Daniel?
Yes, I lived in China for 11 years. 11
years you lived there. So there you go, people. And I always like to tell my Fringers out there, we call our viewers Fringers, by the way, Daniel. One of the things I like to tell them is that if you really want to know what's happening in China, ask somebody that's from China. They'll tell you the truth, because the MSM isn't going to cover it, because everybody's so woke now that if you talk bad about another race, you're all of a sudden a racist, and that's not the way it should be. But you know what? In retrospect, that's the way the CCP wants it to be. So you bring up some great points there. And we're going to stay on do you have anything else you'd like to add to that? I don't want to interrupt you again there. Were you done with the Delta variant? You want to move on?
Well, I just would like to remind the viewers and the American people especially that the source of this virus is the Chinese Communist Party. And there's no doubt about it. And our government is not doing what they are supposed to be doing, which is investigating the Wuhan lab and getting the cure out of the CCP. That's my last point.
Yeah, the cure is over there. And, you can say it till you're blue in the face that the CCP has the cure. That is where it is. They have this thing. They know what this is. And we've talked about this before. Miles has talked about it. Luda has talked about it. Not as Ada, Isla, we've all talked about it. Not a single member of the upper echelon of the CCP has ever gotten infected with COVID-19. And I want you to think about that for a little bit, people. They have the cure. They have vials and vials of it hidden somewhere, because when you create something in the lab, they can create the cure at the same time. And that's exactly what they did. And it's not just this lab, people. I reiterate the fact that the end game of the CCP is to wipe out mankind, and because that's their goal. And though it's almost like they want to be the only people alive on the earth and just control the entire earth and have it all to themselves. But that's how communists think. Hopefully, Daniel, the CCP is going to go the way as Russia, and they will fall soon. I think they're not as tough as they act. I know they're not as tough as they act. And I can see the CCP starting to crumble from within. There's signs, and it's exciting, but we need to get over there and take this thing by the horns, because there are viruses being created. There's outbreaks now in India that are coming over to the U.S. We didn't do anything about this for the longest time, and we need to just stop and do something now. The more you let it happen, the more it's going to happen. You give them an inch, they're going to take 10 miles. That's just how the CCP is. Speaking of which, so, Daniel, do you know what hydroxychloroquine is?
Yes, I do.
So do I. But apparently the U.S. government doesn't, Daniel, because they want to spend $3.2 billion on anti-COVID pills. How interesting is this? Let's run this video now, please.
So today, the Biden administration announced their investment of $3.2 billion from the American Rescue Plan as part of the COVID-19 antiviral development strategy. It's a whole of government effort aimed at developing the next generation of COVID-19 treatments, as well as preparing us for future threats. The program is called the Antiviral Program for Pandemics, and it aims to catalyze the development of new medicines to combat COVID-19, and importantly, to prepare for other pandemic threats. Of course, as we've heard so often now over the last several briefings, vaccines clearly remain the centerpiece of our arsenal against COVID-19. However, antivirals can and are an important complement to existing vaccines, especially for individuals with certain conditions that might put them at a greater risk. For those whom vaccines may not be as protective, we know that there are many people who are immunosuppressed, in which vaccines, at least initially, may not give an optimal response. And it also adds a line of defense against other unexpected emerging things like variants of concern that we are currently dealing with. In other words, it's going to accelerate the clinical testing of promising antiviral medicines that are already in various stages of development, including clinical trial. Things like the Pfizer protease inhibitor, the Atia Roche RNA polymerase inhibitor, the Merck mutagenic nucleoside, Molnupiravir, and others that are in that pipeline. So it's to be accelerating things that are already in process. The other pillar is discovery. And this is very important because this is modeled after the highly successful program developed decades ago for the targeted development of antiretroviral drugs for HIV, which have led to transforming therapies to control HIV, namely discovering new antiviral medications.
First of all, Fauci, he can't even pronounce the names of the pills. Did you see that in the beginning there, Daniel?
Yeah.
He was stuttering over the name. He didn't even know what the names of the pills were. I've lost faith in this man. I don't know about you with Fauci, but he changed his mind so many times on so many different things. He's considered a scientist and one of the most well-respected doctors, I guess, in our nation because of COVID. But as things start to come to light, and we understand that possibly he was the kingpin behind all of this, and we have gain-of-function research being created by him and then sent to the lab in Wuhan. I think the true story has yet to be told, Daniel, and it's scary. And if we have something to do with it, and I've heard our great Secretary of State Mike Pompeo talk about this before. If we do have to be held accountable for this, it'll be a sad day in America's history. but we need to get to the bottom of it. And if Fauci is at the bottom of it, we need to expose him for that. Well, another thing I noticed is they didn't mention hydroxychloroquine or zinc. I've been taking both since this started, since Dr. Yan came over here from China and recommended it, and Trump was silenced for talking about it. And I have probably had one head cold. I've had the best health of my life since I started taking it. I've stories about people that have taken it. And I just want to kind of get your thoughts on our government wasting all of this money to create a pill, Daniel, that we already have that works and that's effective. What do you think about hydroxychloroquine, and what do you think about our government wasting all this money to create something that they don't need to create, and why are they doing it?
Great question, David. Well, I think first of all, Fauci is not a doctor or a scientist. He is a politician. And I think that the American people see that. I think everybody by now should see it. And I think that this spending $3.2 billion developing a new drug that does the exact same thing as a drug that already exists is just, frankly, it's ridiculous and wasteful. And I think it's all a scheme for profit.
Yeah, the government, what they do is, and you kind of went the direction I was hoping you went there with that, is that the government, what they do is they'll have an outbreak like this and they'll throw out, to the highest bidder, people, there's tons of money to be made in this. We need a vaccine for the COVID. I mean, you have every pharmaceutical lining up around the corner to be the first one to get this government contract or to get this thing created that the government will pay billions and billions of dollars for. This is a money grab, Daniel. That's all it is. And when you have a pill already out there, like hydroxychloroquine, which has been proven to help with the symptoms or to even prevent the symptoms of COVID, there is absolutely no reason whatsoever that we should be wasting $3.2 billion to come up with some sort of wonder drug when it's already out there. Listen, Daniel, they didn't listen to Dr. Li Mingyang when she came over here from China over a year ago to tell people, to warn us that this thing was lab created. We didn't investigate it, and look what happened. Hundreds of millions got infected and millions died. Now, they're not listening to her again, and we're not only still losing lives because nothing's being done about this problem that was created in Wuhan, this tragedy, this atrocity that was created in a lab in Wuhan. We're now losing billions of dollars. Where's that money going to come from, Daniel? It's coming from taxpayers. That money is getting used for something that absolutely should be put into something else. There's got to be something else that they can spend this money on. Instead, they're so proud. They would rather not listen still to what Donald Trump told them. This is twice now, two very key moments in his presidency where he told them once, number one, that this thing was created in the lab in Wuhan. They didn't listen. They hated him so much that they silenced him. And now number two, they didn't want to listen to him about hydroxychloroquine. And now we're spending billions of dollars to create a pill.
Great points, David. I think it's really saddening and disappointing that Fauci, along with other politicians and the current Biden administration, were losing lives and we're losing money for what? For profit? And we're not doing what we're really supposed to be doing, which is to crack down on the CCP and investigate them and make them hand over the cure so that we can save lives and save money.
What do we have to do to take down the CCP, Daniel? What does America, what does the rest of the world have to do? What do you think the number one thing is? This is kind of an open, there's no correct answer. I just want to get your insight on this. What do you do to take down the CCP?
Well, I think the number one thing that we need to take down the CCP is commitment from our politicians. I think as long as they are willing, as long as they're committing to taking down the CCP and investigating them, then the CCP will fall.
Yeah, and I think if you cut off the snake, or cut off the head, as they say, the snake dies. And what you need to do is choke them from their money, man. Keep the money from them. We have so many people. We are so indebted to China and the CCP that it's almost like they're afraid to pull away. But Trump showed that we could exist without China. We don't need the CCP. Unfortunately, you have the Chinese people getting caught in the middle of this, and that's just the way it's going to be for a while until they are taken down. But I think us being here is a good start. You know, we have the whistleblower movement. Miles Guo, you know, obviously wanting to start the new federal state of China to take over when the CCP does fall. And it's not if they're going to fall, Daniel, it's when. And I talked to somebody at the anniversary celebration we had, and I'd just like to ask you, when do you think you could see the CCP fallen? Would you give it a year, 2 years, a couple months? What are you looking at? What do you think?
Well, David, I can tell you that I'm very optimistic because the whistleblower movement is growing, constantly growing, and there are many, many people in mainland China who are joining us in secret because the CCP will arrest them and their family if they were to join us in public. And I think that I will wake up someday in my dorm in university, and I'll hear about how the CCP is no more. And I think it's going to take about 2 or 3 years. That's my guess.
Okay, just curious. You don't have to tell anyone what school you go to, but I was just curious because we talked about this on past episodes. Have they ever pushed the Confucius Institute at your university? Just curious.
I have not, but I have had friends who go there.
Ah, okay. So you know about it. Yeah, we've you brought up the university, and I just it's another topic, and it's one of the many ways, you know, as you probably know, that the CCP infiltrates. They show it, you know, they present the Confucius Institutes like they are like you're learning something about the culture of China, when really what they're doing is pounding these young impressionable students' heads with propaganda about the CCP and how great communism is. That's really what it is. And we've always, you know, we've covered that in the past. And of course, the many other ways that the CCP has infiltrated our government. I mean, we have Congressman Eric Swalwell having sex with a spy, Fang Fang. Nothing's been done about that. They said there was a CIA and FBI investigation, but nothing came out of it. I think that story goes a lot deeper than where it is now. And of course, Hunter Biden's involvement with foreign affairs, especially China and the CCP. I think they have him, you know, they got Biden in their back pockets. And that's why I think, Daniel, another reason why our government's so apprehensive and is so weak on policies with China, and they just don't want to they want to posture, but they don't want to take that move because the more they do this, Daniel, the more I believe that the CCP really does have Joe Biden's administration in their back pocket. He's afraid to make a move, and that's what it is. They're politically posturing at the G7, talking the talk. Daniel, are they going to walk the walk? That's an open-ended question. You don't have to answer that. So what we're going to do now is move on next to one of my favorite people in the entire world, Candace Owens, and her take on Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot. Now, Daniel, I'm sure you understand or you've heard about what's going on with the mayor in Chicago. I hate to snicker when I talk about it, but to me, it's unbelievable that people like these are even in office. But Candace Owens makes some really good points here, and she gets really deep and peels away the layers as to why what's really happening in Chicago should be an alert to the rest of the nation about what the real agenda is for the left. Let's roll that video now, please.
Candace Owens has been watching all of this. She understands that symbols do matter. She's the host of Candace. She joins us tonight with a reaction to all of this. Chicago, Candace, thanks so much for coming on, is really kind of a case study in what happens when you apply bad policy.
That's absolutely right. And Lori Lightfoot, I mean, she's a disaster. And I think first and foremost, people take a glance at her, and the first thing you think is this is a woman who is an avowed racist. And you might look at that and say, well, that's obvious because she says she doesn't want to speak to any white reporters and only black reporters. But I think actually Lori Lightfoot is abundantly racist towards black Americans, right? So she pretends, don't pay attention to what she's saying, pay attention to what she's doing. She's pretending that she represents black people when she gets in front and says, I only want to speak to black journalists. But that's meant to be a distraction. Actually, look at her track record. Who is it that she's have her policies led to the mass homicide of? Black people. Black people are dying on the streets of Chicago. Black people are the people that are suffering when you know in the first quarter of this year, 34% homicide rate increase. It's black on black crime, and she has seen this through. The more important thing, though, when you showed a clip of her earlier and she started talking about, we need help, we need help. Do you recall, Tucker, a few months ago when I said to you that the entire defund the police movement, the entire purpose behind what the Democrats do, they don't do anything without purpose. They are always taking a part and parcel of a Machiavellian scheme. I said to you, Tucker, that they're going to start requesting, want the streets to get bad enough until they say, we now need federal help. And at that moment, you're going to see them start talking about a federal police. They were going to want to see federal policing happening on the grounds of these inner cities. I believe that has been the long game the Democrats have been playing. This is why they have been undermining the local police at every second, because they are looking to give more power to the federal government. This is what is happening in Biden's America, and I believe that this is just really what we're seeing is just a faster spread toward America shifting towards a federalized police system in this country.
I think that's really smart. I hate to believe, and I remember when you said that, I remember thinking, boy, I hope that's not true, because it's just so awful that you would create chaos. You allow hundreds, thousands of people to die just so you become more powerful. But I think you're absolutely right. So in other words, none of this was accidental. I mean, they knew defunding the police would get a lot of people killed. How could you not know that?
Of course they knew that. And you look around, you have to study history. And that's why I've said, you see them, they're calling themselves socialists, they're hitting the ground, they're demanding socialism. Well, let's actually take a look at what socialism has been around has been around the world, pardon. Socialism has led to the death of 100 million people all across the world. When you look at communist, socialist regimes of the past, this is what you see. The federal government needs more and more power, and they need to make sure that they take it away from local. So they are taking this away from local. So the Democrats put this plan into place, and now it's speeding up. So she's not helpless. She's saying, we need help from the federal government, we need help from the federal government, so that eventually people on the streets are going to say, please, anybody help us. And you're going to start to see real crimes from the federal government when they put their boots on the ground and start saying, okay, now we have complete and utter control. It is not chaos. From chaos, dictatorship arises. That is the lesson of human history.
It's amazing. I'm completely sold. And Chris Wray, we're going to need to expand the FBI by, 3x so they can keep order in Chicago. Candace
Also,
Owens,
Tucker, I need office time every day.
Every day? Tell me that 14 more times and I'll believe you, with some exclamation points. Candace Owens, great to see you.
Well, first of all, when you impress Tucker like that, you know you're doing something right. And I was impressed too, Daniel, when I don't know how you feel after you saw this, but she really broke this down to the core basics of what's going on here. And if Chicago is an example of what socialism is trying to attain, then this is pretty scary. It's brilliant the way she broke this down. And it was her basically saying, just study history. We've seen this before. And I'm going to tell you something, Daniel. When she said, Tucker said it, create chaos to become more powerful. And then, Candace replied with, the federal government's putting their boots on the ground. They want to take control. They allowed them to do this. And she said, from chaos, dictatorship arises. The first thing I thought about was Hitler and the Nazis. That's exactly what happened during Hitler's reign. They had a country that was disheveled. They had no direction. Everybody was fighting with each other within. They needed a leader. They wanted somebody that was going to put it all back together. Their economy was shot. That's exactly everything. This is a telltale sign. Everything that's happening in the U.S. right now is the exact same situation that Germany was in before Hitler took over. And we know what happened after that. And we cannot afford to let history repeat itself, especially with a nation like ours. And you can see the decline every single day, Daniel. And there's people like us trying to get the word out there and fight against it and speak out against it. And people like Candace Owens that get shut down by the mainstream media because she's called, they say she's so far right that she's crazy and she doesn't know. This stuff she's talking about is historically accurate stuff that we're seeing happen all over again. So I'm really glad that I got to show this to everyone, and I'm glad I get to share this with you, Daniel, because maybe it opened your eyes too to what's going on and socialism in America. And Daniel, I know you lived in China for a long time, for several years, and maybe you could just tell us a little bit about your experiences in China and why socialism, which is the next step to communism, is so dangerous right here in the U.S.
Great points, David. First of all, I would like to say that I absolutely love Candace Owens.
Yeah.
She is brilliant and she is absolutely relentless in debates. I love watching her talk. And she made brilliant points in this video. We can slowly see that, slowly but surely, the current administration and the U.S. government in general, they're gaining more power and they're taking power away from local and state government. And that is a terrible sign. As she has said, 100 million people died from communism, and from chaos, dictatorship rises. And I really hate to see the politicians using COVID as an opportunity to gain more power as people lose their lives.
Yeah, it's horrible that they do that. And I just want to kind of ask you, so do you see similarities between what you experienced in China under the communistic rule of the CCP and what you see happening now in the US? Do you see any similarities between how the CCP treats their people and what's going on in the US right now? There's similarities there.
Absolutely, David. I'm seeing lots of similarities. For example, some states are considering COVID vaccine passports, and that is basically what China has been doing for as long as COVID existed, and it's really about the government taking rights away from the people. And the Constitution of the U.S., they're trying to erase it, and they're trying to erase history, as you could see from the Black Lives Matter movement, and I don't know where they learned that from. Maybe they learned that from the CCP. I say probably. David.
Yeah, I would say that they get their notes from, looking at other socialist governments. But the thing with socialism is they always try to rename it or paint it like a better picture of it to get people to buy into it. And they target people like you. They target the younger generations. They tell them that, hey, listen, the government's going to take over, but you'll be coddled. We'll take care of everything. We'll pay for everything. Social Security, I don't know if you knew this or not. Social Security is a form of socialism, but I think it's one that's necessary. But going back to my original point is they try to coddle younger people to let them know. It's almost like they're telling you, like they do in China. You know this. The government is more important than your own parents. The CCP is your parents. So that's where I see us heading right now. The government wants to coddle the younger generation and tell them, don't worry about anything. Everybody's going to be treated equally, and we're going to give everyone equal pay. But the biggest downfall of socialism, besides the fact that the next step is communism, with socialism, you also let the government do what they're doing now. And it's get their boots on the ground, like Candace Owens says, and eventually take over everything that you do and control your freedom of speech, your Second Amendment right. You lose everything. You lose all of your constitutional rights. But the most important thing to remember is when they paint this picture, it's not what it seems. It really isn't. And the number one reason is, and it's not because people don't realize that the government eventually will take over. They should realize that, but they don't. But the number one thing is capitalism. You lose that. There's no more free market economy. People are no longer in competition with each other. There's no free market. So everybody makes the same amount of money. The guy over here that's doing 10 times the amount of work that you're doing is making the same money as you, who's sitting back here doing nothing. And that's the problem with socialism. And it causes a lot of dissension among Americans. And at that point, it's too late because the government has complete control of everything. And then that dissension starts happening more, and then things get chaotic. And then the next thing you know, you got a dictator. And that's where we're headed right now, people. That's why socialism isn't good. And that's why you need to listen to people like Candace Owens. And that's right, Daniel. She is an amazing debater. I don't think I've ever seen her lose one. They're so scared of her. I actually one time asked AOC if she wanted to debate, and you know how that would turn out. I mean, AOC would walk out of there looking like chopped liver. But yeah, of course she declined. But it's definitely interesting and something we really need to keep an eye on and understand that is exactly where we're heading. And again, when you impress Tucker Carlson like that, you know that you're on the right track, because he was really like, wow, yeah, that makes complete sense now. And it almost seems like it could be a conspiracy theory the way when you listen to it. But again, Candace also covered that up by saying, or covered that piece of it. Just look at history. It's all you have to do. Just go back and study history. But, you know, if we're headed the way we are, you won't have any history to study because they're going to make you forget that too. Just like they're doing in China with the Tiananmen Square massacre, trying to erase that from everyone's minds like it never happened. So that's where you're headed right now, people. You wanna always fight with the BLM and Antifa and erase our history, and all you're really doing is ushering a new era, and eventually your government's going to take over, and you won't have the right to do everything you're doing now. It's amazing, Daniel. It's like it's a self-destructive society, really, if you think about it.
Great points, David. One thing that you mentioned was that in China we have a saying, you should love the Chinese Communist Party more than your parents. Yeah. And I just want to say that the Chinese Communist Party has never represented the people of China, the Chinese people. And they want to brainwash everyone so that they have this mentality where the Chinese Communist Party is the same as China as a nation and the Chinese people, which is completely false. And you should not have any loyalties to a party. You should have loyalty to the idea of freedom, to the Constitution, and to your own people. And that's what the Chinese people need to know. That's what the rest of the world needs to know, is that the Chinese Communist Party is absolutely not the same as the Chinese people.
When you were over there in China, Daniel, what was it like with your friends? Do you remember back that far? What was it like to walk around the streets of China, and you were afraid, right? I mean, you were afraid to speak out against your government, and they didn't have protests like they have now. People were actually walking around knowing, I guess it's like if you don't say anything, you'll be safe. And that's kind of the way you're brainwashed, is you're told not to speak out against the government and everything will be okay. But you have to do what they say. And I guess in the back of your mind, you're thinking, man, this is wrong. I don't feel the freedom that I want to experience. And it's probably why you came here. But is that the general feeling that you get in China?
Well, David, I can tell you that when I attended elementary school in China, I could see propaganda everywhere, in the classrooms, on the campus, and on the streets. And people didn't talk about politics often. And when they did, I always had this bad feeling about what they were talking about. And sometimes I would debate them. And obviously no police arrested me because I was just a kid back then. Yeah. But if I were to do that right now, I think you'd see me in prison in China.
Yeah, you'd be disappeared. That's for sure. Yeah, I talked to somebody else before about that, Daniel, on this show, about how they would debate politics. And actually, no, it was in China, but there's a young girl that I know that lives here that's going to school right now, and she'll go to her class, and you know how everybody's all wokeism now, and if she speaks out against anything woke, she says it's almost like being in China, like you're shut down if you don't follow what people are saying right now. And people, that's where we're headed. If you, like I said, Daniel, it's a self-destructive society. If we keep heading the way we're headed, they're going to end up losing all these freedoms that they're abusing right now. That's the irony of all of this. They are headed to a place where they won't have the ability to speak out like they are now. They're abusing the rights that they have, and it's going to backfire. Keep an eye on it. I'm telling you, it's a dangerous, dangerous way to go, people. You need to start thinking about the future of those that come in front of us and study history. Like Candace said, don't let people lie to you. The history books don't lie, they tell the truth. They're trying to hide it from you for a reason, because they want to take it over and you're going to lose all your rights. The Constitution is not going to matter anymore. And if you think that's what you want, go over and live in China or Iran or another communist country like Vietnam or Cuba and see how it's going over there. Daniel, let's move on to Hong Kong, where a newsroom, surprisingly, while I'm being very sarcastic there, was raided by 500 national security police. Let's roll that video now, please. Do we have the video?
In an early morning raid involving 500 officers, Hong Kong National Security Police arrested 5 directors of the pro-democracy Apple Daily newspaper. Thursday's raid is the latest blow to media tycoon Jimmy Lai, who owns the tabloid and is a staunch Beijing critic. Officers entered the tabloid with a warrant to seize journalistic materials. They were later seen sitting at computers in the newsroom and sifting through reporters' notebooks. It's the first time authorities have cited media articles as potentially violating the national security law. The legislation, which came in last year, is not retrospective, but can use actions from before its implementation as evidence. Senior Superintendent Lee Kwai-wah said the tabloid published dozens of reports dating back to 2019 that incited foreign countries to impose sanctions. Lai has been in detention since December and was denied bail under the security law. He is serving several sentences for taking part in unauthorized rallies in 2019 and faces allegations of national security offences. Under that same law, Lai's assets have also been frozen.
So here we go. Another episode in Hong Kong where the CCP is completely going back on their word to let them be an autonomous collective and have their own freedoms. We have a pro-democracy newspaper that got raided by 500, a complete violation of their freedoms. Hong Kong's falling apart, and we know that. One of the things we talked about in the past year in the Fringe is how the U.S. was very firm, and Secretary Anthony Blinken did say that we would get involved if China made a move against Taiwan or Hong Kong. So we'll wait to see what happens there. This could all, again, be political posture. Maybe they just don't care. But it's, again, another violation of their freedoms, Daniel. And let me tell you, people, like I was talking about in my last little diatribe there with this last segment that we had, this is what happens when you lose your rights. They're going to come and take away your right to speak freely. And you have that now, and you're abusing it, and it's going to backfire on you, and you're never going to have it again. So there you go. There's your little example right there of one of the many ways that this beautiful socialist and communist ideology will work in your favor. You will lose everything you have. If that's what you want, I'm fighting back against you because I'm not going to let it happen, not on my watch. And that's just the way it is. We have these small radical groups in the U.S., and they're actually working toward having our nation operate this way, Dan. And we've seen it. And again, we saw in that last video with Candace. And this is just one of the many ways that you can be controlled by your government. And I just don't understand why people don't see this, Daniel. Why can't they see what's happening right in front of them? And they're given examples. God is coming down and saying, check this out. This is what's happening in Hong Kong. Is this what you want? And he's right there presenting it to you. And no, we just want to fight against everything that our history has been a part of. And we want to erase all that. And we want to go socialist. So this is just another way, again, that the CCP is backing out with this contract that they have with Hong Kong. I think takeover is imminent. And I'd like to pass it on to you now, Daniel, and get your thoughts on everything going on in Hong Kong right now.
Well, David, I think that the people in Hong Kong saw this coming. The reason why they protested was because they didn't want the national security law to pass. And because they knew that if that law were to pass, this would happen. Their rights would be taken away. They would no longer have freedom. And I think that the American people and the Western world, especially, will probably see this and then be shocked, because they don't know, they have no idea how the CCP works, and this is exactly how the CCP works. 50 years of freedom and autonomy, but they broke that promise, and now they are taking away their freedom of the press. Freedom of the press is the first step.
Yeah.
What's next? The rest of every single other freedom that the people of Hong Kong used to have will gradually be taken away. And I want to point out that the CCP wants to reunite with Taiwan. And what happens when they reunite with Taiwan? Is Taiwan going to have any of its freedom? Are they going to be able to keep their freedom, or is it going to be another Hong Kong? That's something to keep in mind, David.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. And here's the thing. Taiwan's not going to go down without a fight. We've actually landed a military jet over there that's capable of carrying, I think they said, tons of weaponry, tanks, bombs, whatever they have. I think we've taken a stance with Taiwan. We should take the same stance with Hong Kong. We are definitely, according to what they're saying now, there's been speculation that this situation in Taiwan could be the beginning of what they're going to call World War III. But I'm going to say this, whatever it takes to take down the CCP, if it means us interfering, as the CCP calls it, with what's going on in Taiwan, then so be it. Because one way or another, as you said earlier, and we've alluded to thousands of times, and it's the basis for everything that we do here with the whistleblower movement and with the new federal state of China, is we must take down the CCP. And if that's the way we do it, by going to war with China against the CCP, not really with China, but it's a different entity, I think. I still look at these differently, Daniel. I don't look at the people of China and the CCP in the same, it's almost like they coexist, but they're so different. It's like oil and water. I don't consider them to be something that you put together and make something positive out of. It's just they're two different entities. The Chinese people, I think, are brainwashed so much, some of them, that they do support anything the CCP says. But my point is, getting around to the original point I was trying to make, is I'm okay with the fact that if that's what it takes to take down the CCP, is to have a war with China to save Taiwan from this, what is appearing to be a takeover by the CCP. We've seen them, what they're doing. They're lining up ships in the South China Sea. They're doing flyovers. China, the CCP right now, their entire mentality is that they not only control and own Hong Kong, is that Taiwan is theirs too. So there's two very important things we need to think about when it comes to Hong Kong and Taiwan. And the most important being is that when we say, and we got our butts handed to us at the summit in Alaska, like I said, with Secretary of State Blinken, when China said to us, you will not interfere with what we have going on with Hong Kong and Taiwan. It's none of your business. Stay out of it. And that's a sign right there that you should get involved. And I'm glad that we are, and I hope they remain strong on this. And I kind of want to go a little bit out left field here with this one, but this is kind of one of the reasons why I think, if we had, now this is a random thought, but it's something he always pops into my head when I'm talking about China, especially, is former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. If he was president, things would be so different right now. If you ever heard Pompeo talk, man, this man is so powerful. He's 100% about China being held accountable for COVID, especially the Uyghurs. Love to see Pompeo in office. I always like to throw that in there, but I always like to think of how much better this world will be if someone like Mike Pompeo were in office, and we'll see what happens. He's probably the one person I would say that I'd want to run this country next, other than Donald Trump, but we'll see how that goes. Again, out on left field there. Looks like we still have a few minutes here. I was going to talk about this, Daniel, but let's get into it. So, did you hear that Hunter Biden's now selling artwork? Did you hear about this?
Yes, I did hear about this. It's ridiculous.
So, yeah, for anyone that hasn't heard, we're obviously about to do a story about this right now. But Hunter Biden, the crackhead son of our president, who has this laptop that they still won't dig into and hold anyone accountable for, just accountable for anything anymore within this government, within this administration for some reason, has decided to take up a career as a professional artist by blowing through a straw and selling his paintings for upwards of $500,000, $500,000 per painting by a crackhead artist. Let's roll that video now.
I guess his Burisma money ran out. Hunter Biden is apparently an artist now. He's selling his abstract works for as much as $500,000 per painting. So who's buying this crap? Hunter's art dealer says sales are confidential, which is raising the question once again of whether the first son is selling access. Greg Gutfeld, influence peddling.
Well, he went from one scam to another, but this one's better because before he was the guy that was having to explain why he didn't deserve 6 figures a month for a job in which he wasn't qualified for. Now he's going to have to try to explain why he doesn't deserve 6 figures for painting things that look like tramp vomit. I don't know if you've seen the pictures, but it's easy to be an imposter in this art world because they're all imposters, aren't they? It's like no one knows art and they play off everybody's insecurities, so nobody really will say, that's not art. And they'll just say, oh, that's pretty good, and maybe it's for influence. But even he's in on the joke because he paints with a straw.
I love that.
And what is he known for? He used to snort blow with a straw. Now he uses to blow paint. That's like O.J. Simpson deciding to go to chef school and using the same knives.
I majored in art history.
You did? Oh, no wonder you're here.
Yes, and I know. Yeah. And I know that there are a lot of stupid rich people who want to buy some access.
Or smart rich people that buy some access. So you could have a Russian billionaire hand the Biden family $500,000, and the Biden family just gives the guy a watercolor back. And we're not supposed to say, wait a second, the media has no clue what's going on here. That would be like Don Jr. taking up sculpting. And so he just whittles a little spear. He's a hunter. He whittles the spear, and then so some Russian gives him $500,000, and the media is going to say, oh, that sounds like it's a straight deal. Of course not. They're violating every spirit of the law. I mean, what's this? It's got to be illegal to do this, right? It has to be illegal.
Well, I'm sure the FBI would be interested in looking into it, given that they're investigating his taxes and other things. So, Harold, you were sitting in front of Andy Warhol Mao painting at one time, and you didn't know it was Andy Warhol. So what do you think of, as an amateur, what do you think of his art?
Look, I don't buy a lot of art, but I don't begrudge a guy. No, but I don't begrudge a guy for trying to make a living. And if it turns out there's something that's not above board here, I'm certain they'll find out. And based on your comments, Jesse, someone's probably going to look into it this afternoon. But I don't begrudge the guy. Heck, maybe Hunter and former President Bush may come together and do some artwork together.
Yeah. I don't think Bush is selling it to Saudi billionaires, though.
But we don't know who he's selling it to.
Exactly, because they won't tell you.
I don't think President Bush
I don't
is
even know if
selling
he
anything.
sold anything.
He's going to sell. Trust me.
We'll
see.
I think about like this. Who in their right mind would go and pay, and by the way, these numbers are just total BS because they just make them up.
Page 6 numbers.
Right, exactly. But who would actually go and even spend $5,000 on one of these paintings and put it in their foyer, and then people come over and they're like, look at my Biden!
Look at my Biden.
Laughed out of town.
I didn't think some of the paintings were that bad, I have to say. And when I was a kid, I used to love doing that blow art thing. I don't know if I was that good, but I kind of liked it.
Is that what you called it?
In the art
blow
world.
Art?
In the art world, I mean, there's a lot of shady stuff that goes on in the art world.
Mm-hmm.
It's a place to hide a lot of money.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that's why this is maybe a little
lot
bit
of brushes
but,
with the law.
Oh, very good. Let's just end it right there.
Yes.
Okay, so the crackhead gets away with doing whatever he wants again. Listen, I don't want to rip on the guy for being a crackhead, but that's what he is. And, there's no accountability for this guy at all. There hasn't been since the beginning, Daniel. They found this laptop with all this incriminating evidence on it, and they still have done nothing about it. For a fact that this guy named Hunter Biden, the son of the president of the free world of the United States of America was making backdoor deals with other countries for millions and millions of dollars for businesses that he had no idea how to run, has no experience being behind, had no reason to be doing any of that. Nothing was ever brought up about it since it's been proven that that's what he did. And we know in the end that it was Hunter Biden cashing in on his dad's name, who was called the big guy in the emails, to get money for support for his dad and for the Democratic Party. You do me a favor, I'll do you a favor. So it's no surprise to me that this is almost taken like a joke, just like the laptop was, because now we have this crackhead, son of a president, who's doing a blow art with a straw and getting $500,000 per painting. And you can't help but think that this is one of the shadiest things you've ever seen. And it just doesn't matter. This administration, this Biden crime syndicate, pushes that envelope so far, Daniel, and nothing gets done about it. So they do whatever they want, whenever they want, and it's a sad, sad state of affairs, and just another reminder of who's really running this country. And it's a joke. It makes us look terrible in the face of all of the other foreign entities that look at us from the outside. It makes us weak from the inside. It makes us seem weak. And just him doing this, I don't even know what else to say about it. I just want to get your thoughts on everything about this, Daniel.
I mean, David, it is, you can't make this up. I mean, this sounds like a complete comedy. And the fact that Hunter Biden is doing this and is because he knows that no one will hold him accountable because Joe Biden is the president. And this is just plain ridiculousness. And it's sad that this is what we're hearing about when the world is chaotic and due to the CCP virus. And I don't even know what to make of this, David.
Yeah, it's just another black mark in our history, and it's something we're going to look back on and say, man, we should have done something about that. And it's amazing that I mean, I want to support this guy, not Hunter, his dad, the president. I want to support Biden, but the more we see stuff like this, you can't help but think this is a complete front, almost like the mafia. This is a front for what's happening behind the closed door. You know what I mean? There's no other way you can possibly construe within a sane mind that what this guy's doing is legal, because there's no way that this guy is blowing into a straw on some paint on a paper and selling it for $500,000 a pop without something else happening for the big guy, Joe Biden, behind the scenes. It's a sad state of affairs. You know, I was just want to kind of back on our like to look at these comments every once in a while that we get here, kind of loosen up a little bit. We have someone here that said something about you, Daniel, and it was because you are second generation new federal state of China, and this person said our second generation of NFSC are awesome, and I can't agree with that more. It's so inspiring to see people like you, Daniel, to step up and to understand what's really going on here. We have so many young adults, children, young adults, even middle-aged adults getting brainwashed by our government right now into believing that things like critical race theory are a necessity in the United States, when really all they're doing is preaching racism to our kids. When we see the atrocities going on in China, and the MSM is hiding it because they just don't want to talk about it, or they wouldn't talk about it because Trump was the one that brought it up, and now they won't talk about it still because if they do, then they're proving that Trump is right. But I think it's commendable for you as a young citizen to be stepping up and to share that with everybody. Don't be afraid to speak out against our government. We're allowed to do that. It's fine. Don't be afraid now that you're here, speak out against China. I know it's a little bit of a risk for us since we have now that we've exposed ourselves, we have the CCP breathing down our necks. It's unfortunate. I've seen the posts from them on Twitter, but I'm not afraid of the CCP. I'm really not. Bigger fish to fry, I like to think sometimes, but sure they like to take me down. But if they do come here, I'll be ready. I'll just have them know that. But it is very, very brave of you as a young man to step up to the plate and to show the world that you are putting your foot down. And I think it's great, and you need to be an example, and you're a good example to the younger generation. And I thank you from my heart for that, for you doing that for everybody, Daniel.
Thank you so much, David, and the person who commented about me. I want to say that I know that maybe there is some a member of the Chinese Communist Party might be watching this, or the police who belongs to the Chinese Communist Party. And if you're watching, I just want to tell you this: the Chinese Communist Party will fall. It's only a matter of time. And if you're watching, it'd be wise if you could just get out now. Get out of there. You shouldn't work for them. They don't care about you. And they're going to be gone in a couple of years. So please, just be smart about it. You know what's right. That's my message for you.
Yeah, we actually have a guy, and that's some inspirational words. We actually have a guy who is sending some messages about the way one of us pronounced something or something. It seems a little bit negative, but gotta keep an eye out for people like that. We love our comments, by the way, whether they're positive or negative. We know, being broadcasters, we're not going to get everything right all the time, but our goal here with GTV and with the Fringe is to bring you the truth. If we don't pronounce something right, I apologize, but that happens, unfortunately. But if you don't agree with us, you're certainly welcome to that. But again, we have a society that's building toward not having those freedoms anymore, and that's the saddest part about it. All right, well, I think that's going to wrap it up for us here today. Daniel, thank you so much. I really appreciate you joining us, and I believe you're going to be with us on Fridays now, every Friday. Is that correct?
That's correct, David.
Okay. Is there anything you want to say to our Fringers before we go tonight?
Well, I'd like to say thank you for everyone who's watching, and thank you, David. And thank you, Matthew, in the background, our OBS person. And I wouldn't be here without you guys. I couldn't be here without you guys. And let's take down the CCP. Anything we can do at all.
That's right, man. You got that right. And again, it's an inspiration to have you. And I thank you very much for stepping up and joining us, not only here on the Fringe, but like I said, for stepping up for someone your age to show the bravery that you show. We really appreciate it. I want to thank all of you watching us tonight for joining us on The Fringe. We are again on every Tuesday and Friday from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m., or as they like to say in this world, 1900 to 2000 Eastern Standard Time. We are simultaneously broadcast in English and Chinese on Tuesdays and Fridays from 7 to 8. I want to thank you all again for joining us. You all have a great evening. Be safe, be free, and God bless you and your families. Have a great weekend and have a good night.
Follow me and I'ma set us free. Take down the CCP. Let me tell you what I've been through, baby. Lived a life that was hella unfair. Seen things that been driving me crazy. In a country where the leaders don't care. Didn't think we had the courage to change it. Tore it down and they weren't prepared. everything that they kept us from saying. Now we talking and they better be scared. Take from us. Tell us what and who to love. Swear I finally had enough. It's time to rise above. Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Follow me and I'ma set us free. Take down the CCP. I said, hey, down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Communism's dead to me because it killed our families.
Communism sucks, hard for me to give a fuck. Try to tell them and they try to keep it on the hush. Middle finger up, turn into a fist. They wanna keep the poor so they never rich. If you wanna see the future, look into the past. Been a century of silence, we gon' take it back. I'm just stating facts, tell you how it is. Ain't no way to change shit if we don't resist.
Take from us. Tell us what and who to love. Swear I finally had enough. It's time to rise above. Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Follow me and I'ma set us free. Take down the CCP. I said, take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Communism's dead to me because it killed our families.
这是你我维护正义的必须，这是你我维护正义的必须。
Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Follow me and I'ma set us free. Take down the CCP. I said, take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Communism's dead to me because it killed our families.
你完了，共产党！你完了，共产党！你完了，共产党！你完了。